by this, that I said, no, Dad, you were the best father anybody could ever ask for. And then he said something very revealing to me. He said, through all the years, I've come to realize one thing, that the financial aspect wasn't important. I've come to realize the only thing that's important in my life is that we, his children, came out straight and true. And he said, after all these years, I believe I've achieved that, and you have. And I'm at peace with myself, he said. Wow, I struggled really hard not to break down in front of him because it was so touching to me, his confession. And I must admit, after that event, there were many times which I broke down in tears for his love for us. I lost my dad 2 years ago after a tough battle with cancer. And the one thing I regret is that he never realized that I had achieved the role of an Episcopal office. He never knew I was a bishop. But somehow, I think that my dad and my mom look down and are content with the way his children have sort of ended up. Isn't this the norm of grace for us? What I want from my dad, I received in abundance. I know some of you parents want to give your children material goods, but that's not really what children want, not faithful children. What I want from my dad is what I received: his love, his care, his unconditional acceptance of me. I got that in abundance. And I, in return, wanted to give back to him what he so wanted, and that was to be the best person I could be. And that's exactly what our relationship to God is. That God wishes for us to love others, and we then give back to God, fulfilling his wish. You see, the New Testament definition of love has absolutely nothing to do with any kind of emotional feeling. The New Testament definition of love means to be there for others, to be there for the other, especially the lost, the lonely, the dispossessed, and the oppressed. I pray that you will always keep that priority clearly in front of you, that you will be there for others and for each other, and not be distracted by lesser priorities, especially things like institutional maintenance and just keeping churches going. Our task is to go out and love others and care for others. Now, this brings us squarely to the future, folks. Because as I look around in our churches, especially our mainline United Methodist churches, everybody's worried about their future. Everybody turns around and says, where are the hordes of young people that are going to take over for us? Where are our sense of children that we're going to move ahead as we sort of have to retire? And I see grave doubts in churches about our future. And what I tell those churches and what I see in those churches is it's okay to have doubts. There's nothing wrong with that. There's another old story about a young couple who was going to be married, and they were hopelessly in love. And one day the bride-to-be turns to her fiancé and says, my mother really wants to know, will you love me always? And the young husband-to-be says, love you, I'll adore you, I'll worship you. And then she turns to him and says, will you love me even when you're old, when I'm old and gray? And he says, I will love you more than the grains of sand on the beach. I will love you. And then he pauses for a moment to think about this. And she says, well? And he turns to her and says, you're not going to look like your mother when you're her age, are you? I'm glad my mother-in-law is 1,200 miles away and wouldn't hear that joke. But what it points out is that even couples hopelessly in love have doubts. Even those of us of great faith have doubts, and that's okay, folks. But what we have to remember is faith's response to doubts. And that response is always, never underestimate the power of God.